Hello, everybody. Pastor Blake here. I'm the pastor of SOLA Church in Gulfport, Biloxi area. Recently, I had an opportunity to sit down with Dr. Jay Stone. He's a local psychiatrist and psychologist in the area. We're talking about the issue of mental health, a very, very important subject that we were excited to be able to sit down and ask some questions and answer some questions about. If you have any concerns or questions, please feel free to drop us a call, drop us a line. solachurchgc.com. You can email us, you can hit us up on Facebook, or you can even call the church. We'll have that number available for you as well. I hope you like it, share it with as many people as possible, and I hope you enjoy it. Grace and peace. Well, Dr. Stone, thank you so much for your time, for carving out space in your schedule for us to be able to sit down and have a conversation. It is a critical time that we're living in, and I think it's so important for us to be able to be open and honest and have conversations that are much needed, particularly about mental health and the things that we go through in this life and having to adjust all of us to life right now. So again, I just want to start off by saying thank you for your time. I know it's a busy time for you, but I so appreciate you and your family and your time today. I want to start off by asking you first, how are you? How's the family? How's everybody doing?
Doing well. Thank you, Blake. I appreciate you asking.
Good.
We're hanging in there.
Yeah.
Hopefully like everybody else.
Yes, for sure. For sure. It's good to hear. I mean, right now, being healthy is like worth its weight in gold right now. Just your health and even being together psychologically is very important. Right now, I know my family and I, we are having to adjust like everybody else, but thankful in the big scheme of things, the big picture about life, that we're thankful for our health. Mm-hmm. We're thankful for being on this side of the dirt, and but so many people don't have that same story. Mm-hmm. They're struggling in deeper ways. And so I know you fairly well, and some of us in this room might know you, but a lot of people who may be watching this don't know you. So I want you to take a few moments to kind of do the holy, godly brag about yourself and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and your experience and what you've gone through and your passion. Okay. Why you got into the line of work that you're in.
Sure. Well, I started off actually in law enforcement in the Air Force. I'm retired Air Force. Mm-hmm. So for the first 7 years, I was a criminal investigator with the Office of Special Investigations, and became really interested in human behavior and thought processes and psychology, and decided that I wanted to learn more about the human mind and human behavior. And so kind of have a change of course, and with God's guidance, I ended up becoming a psychologist in the Air Force, and did that for the rest of my career. And then as a psychologist, deployed a couple of times to Iraq and spent a year in Korea, so I got to do some real life stuff, kind of earn my spurs. Yeah. And since I've retired in 2013, my family and I retired here on the Gulf Coast, and we fell in love with the Gulf Coast when we got stationed here, like so many other military people that get stationed here. Yeah. And have been in private practice for the last 5 years as a clinical psychologist. My wife is our office manager for the practice, and my co-partners in the business are retired Air Force mental health providers. That's as well. Great. Yeah. So we kind of run it as an Air Force operation because that's what we know.
Sure, absolutely. That's good. That's good. Well, your experience is vast, and I think it is much needed, especially in the area that we're living in. Supported by 2 very large military bases, training bases. We see all kinds of people come through our city, and even as a pastor, a lot of people who are military, either active duty or retired, or serving in some reserve capacity. They're military families. We're a military family, my wife and I and my kids, and we're so thankful for you and for what you do and your heart, your passion for helping people and being there for people and some of our most critical times of need. Before we get to the serious stuff, I just want to ask you, what are some of the things that you do for fun? What do you do to relax and kind of kick back and just enjoy yourself?
That's an important question, and we should ask everybody that question, and hopefully they have a good answer, because everybody needs to carve out time for fun. I love to golf, and I try to golf every Saturday. Believe it or not, with my father, who's in his 80s and still is a good golfer and can usually beat me.
I love it.
And then a couple of golfing friends. I love to fish, especially with my son. That's kind of a new thing that he and I are doing together. And we recently bought a boat, so we've been spending time on the boat.
Nice.
So time with the family, time with friends.
Sure.
I make that a priority to put work behind me and have some fun.
That's good. That's good. Well, I haven't got around to getting my golf game up. Maybe you can kind of show me a thing or
I'd
two.
love to.
You'd love to whip on me for a little bit.
Challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted. I love it. I love it. Well, I'll take you up on that. I guess if you're ready, we can get to it.
Sure.
There's so much I want to ask and so much questions, so many questions that I think are so important for us to kind of dive into, especially in regards to mental health. And I want to also leave time for you at the end to be able to share whatever on your heart. So I want to jump right into it. The first question I want to ask is, in this season where things have been increasingly difficult for many people, some of course more than others, what are some of the things that you've seen an unusually high amount of frequency in? Have you seen those who are openly or professing Christians respond differently during these times? But basically, what are some of the things that you've seen in a usually high number in during this time that we're all facing right now?
Yeah. Well, I've been fortunate enough and blessed enough that my practice has been able to continue through the virus. And probably about 2/3 of my patient I'm able to see by video or telephone, which is a nice service to offer. One of the things that I guess I've noticed is that the folks who seem to struggle the most are people that live alone. We need to really be on the lookout for them because not only are they fearful of coronavirus, but they're also lonely.
Absolutely.
Also, I've noticed that patients that are elderly or have underlying health conditions are more nervous.
Sure.
Because they're more vulnerable.
Absolutely.
And so they're more scared.
Yep.
And so, those types of people we really need to do a better job of paying attention to and contacting and connecting with them.
Sure.
Being a Christian helps. I'm not going to lie to you. And having faith in something, and you know this, Blake, from your studies of psychology, that there's tons of research that support the notion.
Absolutely.
It's a fact that people that have faith, that believe in something, are happier and healthier and more hopeful.
Sure.
And so I'm always encouraged, and I always explore spirituality, and so I'm more encouraged when my patients believe in something. And so I make sure that I explore that and encourage that.
Sure.
So that's definitely a bonus. That's an important factor.
Sure. That's so good that you say that. As we were talking about before we went on camera, there's so many people who are living alone, who are having to work from home and don't have people close to them in their life, and not having access to be able to get to family or close friends because of quarantine or shelter-in-place orders and those kind of things. Puts you at a great risk for deeper struggles. And so it's good to hear you say that that's one of the groups of people we need to be aware of, those who are alone. And even you mentioned the elderly. My mother-in-law, she has her own home here on the coast, but she's living with us pretty much. She's lived with us almost the entire time. And it's great to have her in-house and being able to spend time with the kids and be a part of our family structure. But I just think about so many elderly people who may not even have that opportunity to be able to live with a loved one or feel isolated or, like you said, even scared to not only just scared of what's going on, but having that isolation in their life and being able to live alone. So it's encouraging to hear you say that those are the people we need to be aware of, but also kind of heart-wrenching to think that there's so many people who just don't have anybody in their life and that are at great risk. So I appreciate that. The second question I wanted to ask you, it seems like this corona business is not going away anytime soon. It's going to be around on some level or another in our lives. What are some of the strategies that you could kind of give people to use to help us all readjust our lives? Life, in many ways, has to work on a rhythm. Yeah. What are some of the things that we can do, strategies that we can employ to help us all readjust right now?
Well, the first recommendation I give to people is to be careful of news and to limit your access to news stories. You can scare yourself by watching the news 24/7 and really obsess over. I don't like the fact that they make so much about numbers. How many daily count, almost like a body count, and I think that can be really scary, and you can get hung up on that. So, my first advice is to limit your exposure to the news, and try to stick to reliable news sources. And as you mentioned, it's important to develop a rhythm, a healthy routine, kind of a new way of living, and a new schedule. Healthy routine, a daily regular routine of exercise and healthy eating, kind of a new normal, as people say.
Sure, yeah.
Because having a routine is comforting, and having a family routine, staying connected. And we talked about reaching out to folks and connecting. I think it's unfortunate that it's been called social isolating. I don't like that phrase. I think it's really physical isolation.
Right, yeah.
Because we don't want to isolate socially.
Right.
We want to isolate physically.
Right.
And so we want to continue to socialize. And fortunately, we have technology to help us do that.
Right.
You hear about Zoom and all that kind of stuff, and it's
Love some
wonderful.
Zoom.
It's
Yes.
great.
Love Zoom.
The old telephone, walkie-talkie, whatever. We need to stay connected.
Sure.
Do family things. Turn lemons into lemonade.
Yeah.
Coronavirus gives us an opportunity to spend more time with family,
That's good.
to do Bible studies, to pray together.
Yeah.
So I thought that's the normal recommendations I give to people about settling into a new routine.
Absolutely. I know that's been for me the hardest challenge to overcome during this time is trying to find that new rhythm, that new pocket. I call my life has to in many ways for me has to kind of groove into this pocket where I understand it. I know what my routine is. I know what my day-to-day is going to be, and it helps me to plan and prepare and be all that I aim to be for that day. But with this realignment and this readjustment, it's been kind of hard to find that new normal going on. And so having to prepare to preach different, or having to not be able to be around the people that I love and care for and I'm responsible for, not knowing how people are actually thinking or feeling because I can't be around them and have that conversation or look at them in their face, has been challenging. So I've had to do the things that you mentioned, which is great to hear. Utilize technology more, get on the Zoom meetings, and those have been some of the greatest moments I've had. This really allowed me to appreciate people more, appreciate the closeness that we have, and realize that our connection is deeper than just being physically around each other, that there's something that we share that's different. And so those are encouraging things that are kind of pushing me forward to get into that new pocket, that new rhythm. And as eventually we prepare to kind of go outside again, eventually they're going to lift the lid and allow us to go outside. And so trying to find a new pocket and then go back to finding another pocket, a new rhythm of life. So those are very important things that you mentioned. The third question I wanted to ask is this: it's more of a personal question. What are some of the things that your experience and your training has prepared you for, that you employ during this time of having to readjust life during this whole global pandemic?
Well, sometimes I almost feel like I'm deployed again. I mentioned to you I deployed to Iraq twice, and in many ways it feels kind of similar to that. The quarantining, the isolation, the fear, and so I learned a lot of strategies and tools during those deployments that I'm able to utilize now and to share with others. Personally, what works for me, first and foremost, is faith and trust. Trusting that God's in control and that God has a plan. You're probably aware that years ago in the early 1980s, a man named Rabbi Kushner wrote a book called When Bad Things Happen to Good People.
That's right.
And in this book, Rabbi Kushner made the argument that God isn't always in control, that sometimes things happen to people randomly, and that God's not in control. Well, we know that's not biblical.
Absolutely.
And in response to that, a man named Jerry Bridges wrote a follow-up book called Trusting God Even When Life Hurts, and made the argument that God is in control of everything,
Absolutely.
no matter what happens.
Yeah.
And I take a lot of comfort in that, in reminding myself that this is all God's plan.
Absolutely.
And I just have to trust that it's perfect,
Yeah.
and that there's a reason for everything.
Sure.
And so when I pray to God, I try not to ask for things, because God already has a plan for me. And who am I to try to talk God out of a plan?
Sure.
He's God.
Sure.
He's got the perfect plan for me. And if I were in charge of myself, I'd make a mess of things. So when I pray to God, I try to pray for peace and comfort in whatever God has planned for me. And
good.
this is a good time for me to use that. I also, personally, I see things like this as an opportunity to be a witness to Christians, but especially non-Christians, as what Christianity has to offer. And it's an opportunity for me to show calm and happiness and comfort in a scary time.
Sure.
And hopefully people will observe that and say to themselves, well, I want some of that.
Sure.
Where's that coming from? And so this is an opportunity for Christians to be a shining light to others, especially non-Christians, of what are some of the benefits that comes with being a Christian, and that comfort of knowing that I'm in good hands here,
Right.
and that God's in control. Because right now, a lot of people feel like that they're not in control,
Absolutely.
or that that something bad is in control, and that's not the case. God is still in control.
Absolutely. You know, you mentioned the sovereignty of God. For me personally, that has been one of the scarlet threads that has run through my life for many years now, realizing that there is a God and He's sovereign, He's in control. I'm not Him, and I'm not in control of my life. Has been a big anchor for me as well, and getting through rough moments, and knowing that I'm in good hands, my family's in good hands, and even motivation to share the good news about Him with others who may not have that certainty, who may not have that anchor in their life, and thinking that things are just a part of random chance, or that life is not ordered and metered by anyone. And so with that idea in mind, many people struggle deeply with their life and feel like so hopelessness sets in. All is lost. Why not give up? Why not just throw in the towel and say, I'm done with this, especially when life gets hard. So in that same mindset, I wanted to ask you, with the risk and rise of sudden deaths right now, even suicides, what are some of the red flags that someone and that we may know, or even personally, is not doing well? What are some of the red flags that we can detect in someone else's life that are close to us, that we know of, that's having a hard time, that they're not doing well? And then to be able to look at ourselves as well and say, what are some of the red flags that we can detect in our lives that let us know that we're not doing well and we're teetering on some very dangerous ground?
Yeah. Well, quite simply, one word, and that is change. So what I look for in others and myself is any sort of a change, especially a significant change. If I see a radical change in somebody's mood or their behavior, I have to wonder why, and I'll ask.
That's good.
You know, I've noticed a change in you. You know, are you okay? What's going on? You know, is there anything I can help you with? Is there anything I can do for you? Do you need help?
Sure.
And don't be afraid to ask, and push sometimes too.
That's good.
You know, I'm concerned about you, and don't be afraid to ask if somebody is having thoughts of suicide. Some people fear that if you ask, you might plant the idea in their head, but
Right.
research and experience has shown that that's not true. You're not gonna plant the idea of suicide by asking somebody. And so don't be afraid to ask if they're having thoughts of suicide. And sometimes that's all it takes is for the person to know that you care enough
Sure.
to ask them. And that's the opening that they are looking for.
That's good.
But back to that word change. That's what we
Yes.
need to look for, is
Mhm.
any sort of a change. Follow up with, pursue that.
That's good. That's good. I know that's been something that is very close to many of us right now. There's seemingly this rise of dramatic change in our lives. We all have to experience some level of change right now. Just change in rhythm, change of life. We talked about that, but the radical change, the abrupt changes in us as individuals, we all need to be aware on the radar for those kind of things as well. You know, it's been a challenge for even someone as a pastor being able to navigate how to walk with someone who may be experiencing some of those thoughts. Could you just real briefly, this kind of off the script a little bit, let us know what to do if someone has those kind of thoughts, if someone actually has suicidal thoughts, or who has thought about it, who has contemplated, maybe even drawn up a plan of some sort, or maybe just struggling with that idea. What is the proper, lawful, biblical response to someone who may be experiencing those kind of thoughts and questions in their own mind?
Yeah. Well, I think of three aspects of suicide: suicidal ideation, plans, and intent. So, lots of people think about suicide or have a thought of what would it be like if I weren't around, or wouldn't it be nice if I wasn't here anymore, or Christians thinking I want to be with God, and that's not that uncommon. But when a person starts making plans, you know, thinking of maybe a way of doing it, you know, that's getting a little scarier.
Sure.
And certainly if they make the decision, they have the intent, I'm going to hurt myself, or I'm going to kill myself, that's when we probably need to take action. So I want to explore what their thinking is about suicide.
Sure.
And gauge the seriousness of it. Always offer to arrange for help, maybe with a pastor, or help them get an appointment. If you're afraid that it's imminent, that they might harm themselves in the next 24 hours, then maybe take them to the emergency room.
Sure.
Where they can be assessed immediately by a professional.
That's good.
There's also hotlines that they can call.
Okay.
For example, 1-800-273-TALK is a free crisis hotline that's available to anybody.
Sure.
24/7.
That's good.
You can call that number at 2 o'clock in the morning if you want to talk to a professional counselor free of charge, and you can even remain anonymous. And so I always advertise that phone number to people. Call if you need to talk to somebody.
That's great.
If it's a friend or someone that you love, give them your phone number and tell them, call me anytime, right? Here's my phone number, here's my Facebook, here's my email address, reach out to me. But oftentimes just showing that you care
Absolutely.
is enough. And then following up with them, check on them.
Sure.
Hey, remember that what we talked about the other day? How's that going?
That's good.
Anything I can do for you?
Yeah. That's good. You kind of touched on where we're going next. I wanted to ask, actually you touched on it quite a bit. What are some of the ways that we can support one another during this time, and specifically as a pastor, or as a church, or just as an individual who may be either prone to who are currently struggling deeply in a psychological way? What are some of the ways that we can actually support each other, whether it be from a pastor to a church member, or whether it be just from a brother to a brother, or just as a community? What are some of the ways, if we know someone is prone to struggling, or who are actually currently, we know of, they're deeply into something right now, struggling psychologically, what are some of the things we can do to support each other as a community?
Well, as a pastor, I think you're doing a great job of staying connected with your flock. As you know, Paul continued to communicate with his church even from prison.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, church is not a building. Church is the body of believers.
Absolutely.
And so, staying connected with your church body the way that you've been doing. And as church members, looking out for each other, checking in with each other. Hey, haven't talked to you in a while. How's everything going? Anything I can do for you? Just staying connected. hooking people up with services, knowing what resources are available, whether it's helping them get an appointment with a professional like myself,
Sure.
Connecting them with friends, or getting hold of you
Yeah.
for spiritual counseling.
Sure.
If they're in the military, connecting them with the chaplain
Absolutely.
or with a mental health clinic. So knowing what the resources are,
That's good.
and getting them connected with those resources. But most importantly, just showing that you care, praying with them,
Yeah.
letting them know I'm gonna be praying for you,
Yeah.
and maybe a prayer chain, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Asking if it's okay if I stay in touch, if it's okay if I follow up with you, is it okay if I have other people contact you? Mainly just letting them know that people care.
Absolutely. That's good. That's so good. I know it's been a challenge to do so, just being able to connect with people, especially if you have a large group of people that you're accountable to or that you're responsible for. But making that effort, I know for me, if someone reaches out to me, it goes a long way with me. So just making that concerted effort, that intentional effort of reaching out to one another, I think goes a long way, no matter what. But then also, like you said, being loaded with the resources necessary. There's one thing to check up on somebody and ask how you're doing, and they tell you, yeah, I need some help, and you don't know where to go to get it. You don't know where to point them to. It's like, gee, thanks for the checkup, but you didn't help very much. And so I think that's very, very, very important to know where to go and how to direct somebody to the necessary help that they need. That's a true friend, that's a true brother, a true pastor, or a true Christian for another one. So I really appreciate you saying that. Well, basically the final question that I have is mainly the question that's based upon what sparked this whole conversation in the first place. So a couple weeks ago, I preached a message in 1 Peter chapter 5 that had in it chapter 5 verse 7, which tells us to cast all of our anxieties on God because he cares for us. And so as I was teaching the text, I noticed how basically how strong that call was, and how much I was thundering in saying those words and calling us to cast our anxieties on God. And I even mentioned that one of the reasons why many of us struggle most is because we don't obey those words and casting our anxieties, all of our worries, our concerns, all those things on God, believing that he cares for us. But then I had a moment where I thought, wait a minute, I don't want to sound insensitive to the fact that there are cases and there are times in our lives when we may need other help. Mm-hmm. And so as a pastor and as an individual, I've struggled with, how do you balance biblical instruction like 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 7 that tells us to cast all of our anxieties on God because he cares for us, with also having a need for professional or additional help? Is there a line? And if there is a line, where is that line? How do you balance that idea with a Christian may say, if we truly obeyed that verse, we wouldn't need professional help? What would you say to that? What is that? How do you juggle that conversation?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And this is a conversation I have with many of my Christian clients. Is oftentimes Christians feel guilty about having anxiety or fear. And they think that they're going against the Bible, and that they're sinning because they're not trusting God. Maybe that their faith isn't strong enough, and if their faith was stronger, that they wouldn't experience fear or anxiety. Right. And so what I point out is that fear and anxiety are natural human responses. God put those in us for a reason. The fight or flight response is very necessary. Sure. That's our survival instinct. God programmed us to want to live and stay alive. And so that's very natural.
Sure.
It's just as natural as our sex drive. And so, should we feel guilty about having sexual desires? No, God gave that to
Certainly
us.
not, right.
It's what we do with those urges
Sure.
that matters. And so I think the first step is to sort of normalize for people fear and anxiety, and that they shouldn't feel guilty or feel that they're sinning or disobeying God. Now, that having been said, we can obviously find great comfort in knowing that God's got our back.
Sure.
And that's how I kind of interpret it.
Sure.
And now, as far as when does a Christian need professional services, or when does anybody need professional
Sure.
help? I think if it gets to the point where the fear and the anxiety or the sadness or whatever is either impairing a person, so it's making them impaired. They're having trouble going to work. They're having trouble with relationships. They're having trouble getting school done. Or they're significantly distressed by it.
Sure.
So if it's causing severe impairment or distress, then you might want to seek some professional help. And there's no shame in that. Learn some coping skills.
Sure.
Learn how to take better care of yourself.
Sure.
And manage those symptoms.
All right.
Not make fear and anxiety disappear, because that wouldn't be helpful.
Right.
Imagine somebody who never experienced any fear. So here's a person who's completely fearless.
Right.
Is that a good thing?
No.
That person's going to wander into places they shouldn't be wandering
Absolutely.
into and saying things to people that they shouldn't be saying. So that's not very safe.
Right.
So we need that. We need that normal fear and caution. But if it gets so extreme that it's causing impairment or distress, then maybe you need to learn some tools and some skills.
Sure.
And I firmly believe that God isn't going to put more on us than we can handle.
Yeah.
God's going to give us the tools that we need to cope. And many of those tools come from the Bible. In my opinion, the Bible is the best instruction book for how to manage stress and anxiety.
That's good.
And God's going to test us. He's going to put pressure on us to challenge us.
Absolutely.
And to hone those skills.
Absolutely.
But he'll do it in a loving way, and
Yeah.
never more than we can handle.
Yeah.
So that's my take on
That's good.
on how to think about
Yeah.
the purpose for fear and anxiety.
That's great. That's just great stuff. I thank you so much for your input and for your expertise and for your willingness to share and answer those questions with us. It's some things that have been sitting with me for a bit, and others around me have asked, and things that I've always wondered. How do I balance the two? How do I marry the two? Which is one of the reasons why I went back to school to train myself to better understand what's going on in my head, to better understand what's going on in others' minds and hearts that I'm responsible for caring for. And oftentimes finding that even my theological training didn't prepare me to understand certain degrees of mental health or psychological struggle. And so it's good to hear that there is a marrying of the two, that you can be a professional and offer coping skills and tools to someone who struggles in many ways, or who experiences an abnormal amount of fear or anxiety or psychological stress. But also there is a blending of that profession with biblical truth that you can integrate into that process.
Absolutely.
The best resource manual we've been given on this earth to be able to cope with and to deal and to thrive in very stressful situations that we may experience. So it's really encouraging. I'm so thankful to spend time with you. I just want to give you some time, as much time as you want and you need, to just kind of tell us what's on your heart. So maybe even cover some things that I didn't ask that you think would be great and helpful to kind of unpack in this overall conversation of mental health and psychological stress, and just to help people who may be experiencing a lot of questions and concerns and anxieties and all kinds of things during this whole COVID-19 pandemic that we're going through. So, floor is yours.
Well, I appreciate that, Blake,
Sure.
and thanks for inviting me to have this conversation with you. This is so important, and I appreciate your interest in mental health, and it's so important that we talk about it. and that we destigmatize mental health so that people know that it's okay to talk about mental health and mental illness and talk about and seek help.
Sure.
To include medications if necessary. We've covered a lot of ground, and I can't think of much else other than I can't overemphasize the importance of staying connected and talking with each other and looking out for each other, keeping a positive attitude, trying to see the glass as half full rather than half empty. I mean, we could choose to focus on, oh my gosh, people are dying, I could get sick, this is terrible, I can't go to work. Or we could focus on the silver linings. Well, this is an opportunity to spend more time with my family.
That's good.
This is an opportunity to really dig into the Bible more, or begin a Bible study, or to learn how to play the guitar.
Yeah.
I've got some time on my hands now. What can I do with this time that's a gift, rather than sit and fret?
Absolutely.
I remember when I was stationed in Korea for a year, and I would see young airmen who had just gotten there and they're homesick and they miss their family, and they're just sitting in their dorm room just trying to wait out the year.
Right.
And what I would tell them is, hey, see this year as a gift. This is an opportunity where you don't have some distractions that you normally have back home. Do something with this year. Learn how to play the piano this year. Quit smoking this year. Get in shape. Get that six-pack abs.
Yeah.
Think in terms of what's the blessing of this?
Sure.
What's the flip side of the coin? How can I turn lemons into lemonade? And so I'm happy to chat with anybody at church that wants to hear more about that, or if needs some resources or advice.
That's good.
And as always, I know you come to me for suggestions and advice and resources.
Sure.
So I'm always available for that.
Absolutely.
And continuing to pray for your leadership, and I appreciate what you're doing, Blake, for our church. So keep it up.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, and thanks for this opportunity to talk about mental health.
For sure. Well, thank you so much again, my brother. If you could just take a few seconds and let everybody know if they need to or want to get help from you on a professional level, and be able to maybe see if they can book an appointment. What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Sure.
And utilize those services. If you could just take a couple minutes, and then we'll close out.
Thank you. A shout out, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So I work at Bridgewater Psychiatry on Cowan Lorraine Road in Gulfport, and we have 10 providers here. That half of them prescribe medicine, the other half are therapists, and so we take most insurances. And we see all ages, and so we pretty much cover all kinds of conditions. Our phone number is 228-331-3310, and just call the front desk and let them know what you're interested in, either medication or counseling or both, or you're not sure, you just want to talk to somebody to figure out what you need.
Sure.
And we'll get you an appointment.
Perfect. That's great. Well, I thank you so much again, my brother. I want to go ahead and give you a COVID-19.
I was hoping you'd do that.
Absolutely.
We can still do that.
We can still do that. That's perfectly well.
Absolutely.
Well, Pastor Blake here with Dr. J. Stone. I thank you guys so much for tuning in and being a part of this conversation. I hope that it was helpful. I know that it was helpful for me as a pastor and as a man who's leading a family and leading the church. I hope it was helpful to you too. If you're interested in dropping us a line or having a conversation with us to know more about what we do and how to get in contact with J. Stone, please feel free to contact us. Our number will be on the screen, as well as our website, so you can drop us a line real quick. We love you guys. Thank you so much. See you soon.
God bless.